Welcome, everyone, to another episode of Data Dialogues. I'm Julien Redmond from Ignition, the new name for Certus Insight. And today I have with me a panel of experts to talk about the changes in cookies, and that doesn't refer to chocolate chip. So I'll get everyone to introduce themselves. Brent, do you want to start with a quick intro?
Yeah, sure. Brent Banning, independent consultant these days, but previously from Salesforce, Lotame, and Datarama. I've spent the last sort of 15 years in the data insights and ad tech, martech world. So hopefully I can add some great value to this discussion this morning.
Awesome. Thanks for
Yep,
joining,
James Hartwright,
James.
managing partner at Cognition Studio, one of the Certus group. And yes, I have a long history with Brent and with Richard, for that matter, back 15 or so years. Again, in the ad tech martech space, but very definitely within the data management, warehousing, and insight side.
Excellent. And Richard, obviously our audience probably knows you, but for completeness.
Account director for Ignition, but as James alluded to, my background has largely been in marketing or using data. So I've did 4 years with the Australian Direct Marketing Institute or Data Driven Marketing Institute. I also teach a course for the Fundraising Institute around data management. So this is an area rather near and dear to my heart.
Excellent. Hopefully, there's some banter between you guys if you've
Yep.
all known each other for way longer than I've known you. So I guess the topic is navigating a cookieless world, and so that sounds really interesting. And I think it's one of those tangential subjects to the regular data management style conversations that we have with this audience. So hopefully, if you're listening, you'll find this really interesting because it's probably an insight in where your business is heading or what your business is going to have to deal with. So first of all, let's get started with what is a cookie? What is a third-party cookie? Brent, do you want to pick that up?
Yeah. Julian, as you said, it's not the chocolate chip variety that I've probably been munching on this morning, but it is a small embedded piece of data sitting behind your browser, and you've probably got a couple of hundred of them sitting on your laptop right now or your phone as you're listening to this podcast and recording. But basically, it allows advertisers to track you and then hopefully, and I say hopefully because I don't think anyone's really got this right, present you with relevant advertising or content across the internet.
Yeah, right. So how long have cookies been used for?
Best part of 25 years, I think, is probably the right amount to say they've been used. Probably the late 90s is when people started to use them, such as Google came along and started using to track people. Now, obviously, you look at the big players across, Meta. We can't call it Facebook anymore.
Yeah.
We'll be in trouble for that if we refer to them as that. Apple, Amazon, all those companies are using them to track you, but now there's the independent players coming into the market. And that's sort of been the last 10 to 12 years where independent companies have been able to take away some of that ad spend from the likes of those bigger players.
So it's fair to say there's a pretty substantial industry developed around the use of cookies. Is that
Billions, yeah.
right?
Definitely.
Yeah.
Billions of dollars worth of stocks traded probably daily around this space. And, many of them have been affected by the, we're depreciating the cookie next week or next month,
Yeah.
and then shifting it out year on year. I think we're at 2024 for Google to depreciate it at the moment. It could be, 26, 27. Who really knows with the number of times they've changed.
Okay. So, well, I mean, obviously the cat's out of the bag that there is definitely changes on the way that third-party cookies and their use are going away. So what's the potential impact for an organisation if all third-party cookies disappear or the right to use them disappears?
There's a few. One, obviously, not being able to target your customers and attract new customers, or then target the current ones with an appropriate offer because they just bought X, so their next logical purchase, which is some of the great analytics work I'm sure James does, propensity to buy that next product. You don't know who they are or where they are. And that's one of the biggest concerns that we'll see. But then you're also seeing other economic impacts across some of those larger software players and also these smaller ones. So it will affect, in some cases, the person that lives next door or down the road because they no longer have a role to play in the ecosystem that is advertising.
Yeah. So, James, from an analytics and technical point of view,
that last 15 years or so with all of that cookie knowledge and finding demographics and behaviors and correlating them, that is going to quite drastically change, because the Metas and the Googles won't be able to track your third-party cookie across all those independent sites, and won't be able to provide back that same level of information to you for you to be able to go, hey, there's a little prospect pool I'd like to hit up who are in this like area. Or as Brent says, is if somebody's come onto my website and just zinged around, maybe put something in the basket in the cart and then gone off. Historically, there's the retargeting. Hey, I can pop up and go, hey, the next site you go to, come back to my website. That all goes, or at least diminishes in its accuracy of being able to target, let alone the accuracy of the offer I'm putting forwards. So what we're going to see is, as and when they come through, more and more websites are going to start asking almost immediately for something like an email address, something that they can tie in to be first party, and then use that to try and do the same sort of thing across all of those various websites and all of the big providers, Google, some others. There's some other sites and pieces that have come up that are helping you do that email linkage type stuff. So yeah, a big change in the way the marketing teams can actually put advertising together and get it to the correct person across all of their interactions, which some people say may not be a bad thing.
Yeah, so
I think then this is where I would weigh in, because I've got two points to make here. On the one hand, one of the impacts is going to be a somewhat of a removal of the spooky factor that a lot of people experience on the internet. Why am I suddenly seeing all of these ads for a holiday when last week I happened to look at flights to New Zealand, for example? But a lot of people still find that a little bit intrusive. And I think we're seeing a lot of the privacy legislation move more into the hands of the customers. What I will add on to in terms of James's point there, that having those unique IDs like an email address or a Facebook ID and so forth is going to be essential. But interestingly, a few years ago, I built a database pool in order to use email addresses to match people who would exist in, say, a CRM to Facebook at the time and Yahoo and other providers. What was interesting was that there are different email addresses. Most people now will maintain multiple email addresses. They'll have a primary email address that will maybe use for friends and family and maybe some of their more important relationships with, say, financial institutions. But then they'll have a tier 2 and tier 3 email address. Interestingly, for the use in matching, it is those lower tier email addresses that actually perform better, because they're the ones people tend to use on all of those other social platforms where they know they're going to get advertised to. So one of the things is not just grabbing, what's your primary email address? In some cases, you might want to maybe maintaining, if you can, 2 or 3 different email addresses for an individual. So it is going to create some challenges. And I also think the last thing is, it's going to force marketers to start being a bit more creative again. I do think that marketers, by and large, have been spoiled with the idea of, well, I can just send out, 1 million impressions of an ad and I'll get, a 0.05% response rate. And geez, I'm happy with that because that'll hit my metrics. Well, in the old world of direct marketing, as I think James and I certainly remember when we were sending out letters to clients and getting response rates, you want a better response rate than that. And that comes through creativity. It comes through offering real value to those people you're targeting. And lastly, of course, it does require organizations to take those leads that they do get, those interactions, far more seriously and do a better job of personalizing the experience and really giving value in exchange for someone's data. The market out there is far more educated now. People know the value of their data. and expect something in return for sharing it.
It's interesting. I thought I was being really clever by having 4 email addresses that I manage, but clearly I'm just part of the pack. So, just quickly, James, is it Google and Amazon and those guys that are managing the demographics around these cookies, and is it the cookie that is the thing they're attaching those attributes to? Is that demographic information the bit that's kind of causing the
there's
problem?
very definitely they're pulling together all of those through that cookie. There's a slightly different one up in mobile apps. There's a general thing called a MAID, mobile advertising ID, but same sort of thing. Every time you open an app, if you've allowed it to track your GPS location, it's bringing all that in. It can see you at home, it can see you at work, it can get some idea of how you're getting to and from work, whether you had a big night last night. All of those sorts of things are on that my little digital twin of my mobile. But yes, what they're definitely doing is bringing those pieces together. So, and take Meta in terms of the things that it knows about you. It probably got either directly or indirectly, it knows when your birthday it is and knows how old you are because people go, "Happy 50th, James." That all of that stuff, along with your active behavioral information, the websites you're going to, what those websites have as their core content, is stuff that they're pulling together. And yes, using those to help you take your existing customer base and do lookalike modeling and then target to lookalikes for prospecting. So all of that stuff, it's going to change. But Facebook certainly, sorry, not Facebook, Google certainly have built a thing called Flock, federated learning of cohorts. So what they're saying is that they're going to have a lot of that similar information, but they're just going to group them. They're going to put in little segments or cohorts of things that generally these people are interested in at this point in time. And every week or every month, you might move into a different cohort of things that's top of mind for you. So we're going to see a whole ton more of that. That isn't going to be as direct, the actual behaviors, but is certainly going to help in some of those of finding pools of people that you could target, through knowing that they've come to your website and you know who they are, and then going through, or, hey, I think in a general marketing creative, I'd like to look for these sorts of people. Let me go and find them, find a pool.
Yeah, so no longer provided, I guess, to marketing agencies or organisations as something they can tap into as a service or anything. And so is that kind of why, as data professionals, this audience is obviously full of data professionals. Is that the why? Because we're going to have to start doing it ourselves and or taking other approaches.
It's going to take a while. But we've already started seeing it. The Ask app not to track if you use Apple. That's the start of the decay. So if you've got a forward-thinking marketing or brand or advertising team, they will already have started doing some of this. So bringing a CDP, customer data platform, together and looking at that unknown anonymous behavior as somebody's coming onto your website and converting them into known, doing newsletters, doing 10% off if you give me your email address now. Those sorts of things are going to start generating more of that, getting the profile data. There's other organizations out there that we've all worked for over periods that will take that email address and add more geodemographics to it to give you even more flavor about your base to work through that CDP. But what I'm seeing is that a lot of people are going to be asking survey questions, giving me, and to Richard's point, a fair exchange of information. Hey, do you have any children? How many children do you have? Do you have a dog? What breed is it? All of those sorts of things to try and get a better understanding of that base that you would have otherwise historically just hooked over to Google or Meta or somebody like that.
So Brent,
the other
sorry, Richard, just Brent, with what you're doing, then are you helping people transition sort of and get ready for this shift? Is that sort of your day to day?
Yeah, and that's sort of where we're seeing, like, I think James hit the nail on the head with, some of the smaller brands are probably ahead of some of the bigger brands.
Yeah.
But the forgotten player, I think, in many of these cases, are the publishers. And without naming names and throwing publishers under the bus, they've probably got the same amount of data on you as similar to maybe what Meta does and similar to what Google does. Because once, paywalls came in, let's say 4 years ago, the majority of Australians probably pay for at least one news site subscription. And so they collected your name, your email address, your date of birth, etc., to create their own profile of you. And so that's also another player. They can also obviously then sell that out to the advertiser. Say, hey, don't go to Meta, don't go to Google, come to us because we can target you on the most premium sites in Australia. So, if you look at the premium news sites across Australia, they've got that same profile information. So they've got some really strong targeting piece there as well. But back to my first point, these smaller companies and brands have been asking for your email address for 5% off spin to win. If you've ever clicked on a LinkedIn, Instagram ad, spin to win, give me your email address and I'll give you 15% off.
Yep.
And all of a sudden their propensity to that customer to buy is all of a sudden you've got their email address, you're now tracking them. You're then getting your all of the advertising through Gmail if you're using Gmail. Your social tab is popping up with all sorts of stuff. Offers tab is filling up with all sorts of stuff from these advertisers. So they're starting to migrate, but I think it's the mid-tier which are going to struggle, right? So top end of town publishers, they've got their stuff covered. They've had it covered for 4+ years. The smaller startups, they've realized, how do I get market share? Instagram ads is one of the main ones they use at the moment. Influencers, give them 10% off their email address, great. But the mid-tier are stuck in this rut of what do I do? Do I follow and brand myself as a lower tier entry startup? Or do I want to follow what a large publisher has done to get all the information? And they don't know what to do. And that's where we're finding a lot of people asking questions and advice on, well, what do I do next? Why do I do that one? And that's the space that I'm finding a lot of the inquiries that I'm receiving is, how do I do this? Well, probably follow the lower tier.
Yeah.
It's tough though to tell that to a marketer that wants to act like a major brand, like a Nike, for example.
Yeah.
You're not a Nike. You need to understand the resources and the technology you have available. Let's operate here and build, because you're not going to build what Nike's built in 3 months. It's going to take you to build what a smaller brand's done in 3 months. Is probably where you're going to really.
Okay, so we've heard about this potential cookie death. Has been delayed already. Is it definitely going to happen? Is it going to go the whole way? Have you got any thoughts on that, Brent?
It will happen in some way, shape, or form. If we think it's going to happen, I think at the nuclear rate of just the end of the cookie is here. I don't think so. I think it'll be phased out in a way that will be replaced by a piece of technology. It's probably more privacy compliant, that allows you to opt out, that allows you to work out what's actually there. If you want to go and delete your age or your age bracket, you'll have the opportunity to go and opt out of those sorts of things. I go back to my time working with James and Richard, right? We had a very old data set back in those days where people could tell us that they've changed. We may not have aged data correctly, but they could tell us by the next time they fill out a survey form or fill out a warranty card that we've got their age wrong. Now, they may be consciously or subconsciously doing that, or they could actually, call up or send an email and say, hey, I'm receiving stuff for retirement villages and I'm only in my 30s. Can you please fix, your targeting up? And so, I think that will become very much the control will come to the consumer. And it'll be, again, back onto the customers around data management and warehousing, managing that data asset in the right way. That's privacy compliant globally. And I think that's something that we're seeing more of, right, is a lot of the technology platforms are using GDPR as the benchmark for privacy. Australian privacy law isn't yet at GDPR level, but we know we're going to get there. It's the same with the Californian privacy law as well. So everyone's sort of starting to shift to that high level of privacy requirements to ensure that they're globally covered, because otherwise, Europe will come after a small mum and pop shop in Australia because they've done the wrong targeting or haven't provided the right opt-out. So everyone's sort of taking that bigger approach of, okay, let's go to the nth degree of what we're required globally and then work from there.
Yeah. You do a lot of training on this. So, the privacy side, give us your perspective on how that's going to flow.
Yeah, I'll actually just add on to Brent's piece. There's the current Australian Privacy Act and New Zealand Privacy Act that says you must keep my data up to date. If I ask for it, you should really only use it for the purposes it was captured. There's an extra piece in the GDPR that we haven't seen, which is the right to be forgotten, and which is if I as an individual say, I dealt with you 1 year, 2 years, 3 years ago, gave you my email address and all these other things. We no longer have a relationship. Please delete my personal data. That isn't in the Australian Privacy Act, but it is in Consumer Data Right. So if you sign up for Consumer Data Right as a financial services and institution, insurance, it's coming for retail energy, and it will spread through. That has right to be forgotten requirements in it, which means you have to remove the names, the email addresses, anything that IP addresses, anything that can personally identify that person. And so if you think about how that filters through from your CRM systems, your CDPs, through to your data lake, your warehouse, all of the marketing solutions you have, your opt-out list in your MailChimp, that's got to be removed all of the way through of those. So there's quite a big impact that is coming under the Privacy Act, as well as ethical use of data. But that's a definitive, effectively law that is going to come through, is you need to be able to remove the personal data while still wanting to be able to see that behavioral stuff over time.
Yeah. Richard, you train people on the impacts, the brand damage and what have you of breaching this privacy stuff. What's your thoughts?
Well, yeah, James has hit the nail on the head. The Privacy Acts are leaning much more towards greater control over the individual. One thing that it was occurring to me when Brent was talking is there have been articles recently speculating of, is there an opportunity for someone to build a centralized data set that you have direct control over, that you can authorize third parties to access. But then, of course, you've got the challenge of, well, who do you trust to do that? Do you trust governments? Well, most people wouldn't trust the government with that level of information. We saw the debacle of Robodebt when the government tried to bring some of their data together that they already owned, let alone what people might want to volunteer for use. But then you have the same issues on the private side as well. So I think from a privacy standpoint, people are going to feel a lot more comfortable knowing that they're not going to be as tracked, that they're going to have a lot more control. The data literacy now is up where people, I think, have that. I suspect that, though, to Brent's point earlier around technology taking over here, is that there are a lot of people that simply don't care as well, that they're more than happy to have their data tracked and, send me special offers, send me ads. I've got nothing to hide kind of thing. So I think we'll end up with almost an opted-in audience of people that are more engaged, are interested in seeing proactive offers from brands, and another segment of the market that says, you know what, I've got no money anyway. Don't advertise to me. I'm not interested. But I do want to come back to one of the other challenges that we're going to face here, which is marketing attribution. No one has a single channel strategy at the moment. We tend to use multiple channels. We're going through Google search, we're going through online display ads, we're targeting through Facebook and so on. And that's always been a challenge for people because obviously, you might see an ad, but then you go back later and you Google the company. Well, does Google get the attribution? I don't think they should, because someone saw an ad. But with a cookieless world, that's going to be a very big challenge for businesses as well, to know when they're spending their money through these channels, how they should attribute a conversion to each channel in a multi-channel in a multi-channel world. Again, that's a challenge I think people are going to get have to deal with sooner rather than later.
If they're not already
I
dealing
think
with
there's
it. Because
the classic stat of you need to have seen a brand 7 times before you get any sort of recall or action on it. And that the what's termed multi-touch attribution of, right, I've got these 7 hits, and then they came onto the website, and then they gave me their email address, and then they actually bought the product. All of that and hooking
Exactly
it
right.
together. Yeah, a TV ad, a radio ad. We're going to be back in that space where we are going to be doing broader brush targeting, and we've got to try and sensibly, analytically stitch that together to go, should we do more TV, more radio, more discounting
Yeah.
to try and get the
Yeah.
right set of people in?
But to bring it back, Julian, to your question around that privacy and particularly what it means for our audience here, we've seen a lot of focus on data breaches, and if companies are going to be asking for more personal information, name, address, phone number, email, etc., people are very untrustworthy at the moment. So companies are going to have to do a lot better job in their governance. And now in a data vault world, of course, we've got some very good answers for that. Hiving that personal information off into satellites, not making it available to all and sundry is a great way of making sure that you've got those protections in place. But it has to go hand in hand. We have to communicate to our customers what information we need, why we need it, and the lengths we're going to go to protect it. Because people are seeing, stories every week now where major brands are suffering breaches through, frankly, stupid human error. And there's no excuse for it. There just isn't anymore. And to James's point, we've seen companies try and push back on the customer data rights, particularly in the telco space, for example, where they're saying, "Oh, we're just not ready." Well, they've known this has been coming for a very long time. There isn't an excuse. The architecture is there, the methodology is there. And so, get your data governance in order, because if you don't manage to build up trust with your customers, they're just not going to give you their data.
No, absolutely.
Yeah.
It's
Can I just add a bit on that trust? Richard talked about it earlier in the fair exchange of information. If we're going to start asking our prospects, our customers, for more information to help us serve them better, we've got to be very delicate about it. The creepy side, why are they asking for this, and why are they asking for this at what time? There's a whole piece of data quality around there that you need to work out some way of trusting it. And I've got the classic, which is just if you've got a drop down, just do a sort of a bell curve and see how many people pick the very first item on the drop down. And that's going to give you a sense of data quality and completeness and accuracy over time. Because if you are asking people for too much information early on, their default is going to be to put ... why are you asking for this, or pick the very first item in the drop down. So you need to look, you will need as a data professional to help your marketing team, advertising team, to sort of give them this doesn't feel right, that factor around the data that they're capturing.
To use an N of 1 as myself as an example, I know I've got over 250 unique passwords in my password manager, all for different things, whether it's memberships or whatever. But I have in my head at least a group where obviously for my bank, I'm quite happy to give them quite a bit of data because I have to. If I had a retail website that sells mountain bike gear or whatever, and they start asking me for personal information, very quickly I'm going to unsubscribe. I'm going to close that account down. But also thinking back to it's putting that power in our hands. I've got 250, most of which I've probably never touched, or haven't touched since they had some membership program that gets me a discount, and I've signed up and never used it again. But I don't go back and close it down and clean it up either. So, I think that flows into that, multiple email addresses stuff. I'm quite happy if it's got my backup email address and just my name and it's a membership number, and they've not asked for any more. If they ask me for anything additional, it gets cut off. So, all right. So we probably need to move on to kind of wrapping this up to the sort of, what's going to happen and what are our recommendations. James, you'd mentioned what Google are doing. Is there any more to shed on, did you say it was federated learning?
Federated learning. I might actually throw this one over to Brent, because I know he's working closely with a couple of companies that are trying to building up this knowledge that in having an email we can help enrich our data and do better targeting. So I'll throw that over to Brent.
Yeah, I think from there, it's how do you do the right thing by your customer in their eyes, right? And I think maybe going back a little bit again, Julian, to your point about someone asked me for too much data, when do I opt out? Maybe look at a good example is an Australian airline asked everyone to update their frequent flyer profile just pre the pandemic, which is quite ironic, but they offered you status credits or points. Would you change your details? Right. I'll let people think about that one in the background. If there's a benefit of getting your next status with 10 status credits, it might prompt you to keep that account open and give them some more data. But onto what James was saying, it's what's next. There's so many players out there that are trying to help people take an email address, connect it to a larger data set, be it demographics, be it geographics, be it psychographic data sets, to allow you to target the right people at the right time with the right message. That there's so much you could be doing as a data owner and as a marketeer to get more value out of your customer data. So I think that's the first piece. There's so many people out there. You need to look at what you have available yourself, and then what technologies do you need to access the customers, the first piece. It's not just the Googles, it's not just the Metas. There are point solutions, there are stack solutions. If we look at the Oracles, the Salesforces, the Adobes, are they the best solutions? In some cases they are, some cases they're not. Should you look at the best in breed point solution to work with your CRM platform that potentially for majority of larger customers will be Salesforce or Microsoft? It could even be HubSpot as well, but they're all starting to work with all these different providers. If you look at what one of my previous companies I worked for, Loademy, they've come out and announced a new product about 2 weeks ago. They're connected into all of the big players. Back in the day when I was there, it was always a struggle to talk to Salesforce's DMP or what is now CDP. It was always a struggle to talk to Adobe, but now the doors are open. They know that they have to interact with these smaller players, so don't always have to go to the big end of town to get the technology you need to operate the data set that you're holding. That's probably where my piece of advice is: open your eyes to some of these smaller players. They don't necessarily have the price sticker shock that you will get from the big end of town, but their technologies are probably a little bit more nimble and probably work a little bit more to your needs. Very
cool. James, any final thoughts?
No, not on that. Not on that piece, but the definitely the look into enriching your data, getting more understanding within your own environment, if you can, because the more you can align your own data, your own strong customer base, the ones with a good life cycle or good lifetime value against third-party data, the more informed your marketing and targeting is going to be.
Yeah, absolutely. Richard, any final thoughts from you?
Completely agree with everything the other two have just said. From my perspective as well, though, I come back to the marketing teams themselves. I'm wondering whether we won't see a bit of a return to what used to be called above the line, a bit of creative campaigning, using some good copy and some good ideas to really attract people to your website and capture that information and really spend time nurturing that lead properly in order to maintain that relationship. And we've seen a fairly stark deterioration of the quality of journalism. I think we can all agree. In almost all of them now are clickbaity because they want to drop the cookies. And maybe now these publishing companies can start recouping some of their lost ad revenue through more above the line kind of campaigns, a bit more creativity, and see some changes back to that. But I do think it will come down to the minute someone gives the time to contact you, that's the time to start applying your data insights and capturing more to show value and prove that you value that interaction and want somebody as a customer.
Well, thanks guys. I think what we've demonstrated is that with cookies going away, things are getting pretty complex. It doesn't seem to be an easy answer. So if you've been listening to this and you actually want to reach out to the team and have a chat, then obviously please do that. And there's ways to do that through the community. Guys, thanks so much for a really interesting conversation. I've learned a lot because it's not an area that I focus on. So I thank you for your time, and obviously if you're watching this, please go and have a look at some of the other content on the DVIC, and we will be back and talking to you soon.